gets into this point where he gets frustrated and he feels like he stonewalls. Like, so he won't engage in a conversation anymore. Then a little bit later, he'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have even got that frustrated before. And then he's just like, well, I just won't bring it up.
Yeah.
And I think there's even stuff in there as well.
Hello.
Hey, welcome guys to Honey, We Need to Chat.
Yes.
We are a married couple doing a podcast on the importance of communication.
Yes.
When communication stops, bad things happen. So we want to get better at communicating so bad things don't happen as much.
Yeah, that's who we are.
Yeah.
So welcome.
Welcome, guys.
To this episode, this Reddit chat episode.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only Reddit chats today, though. We have another listener. I'm going to say send in because it's not a write in. So we have a special audio story that was sent in by one of our chatters.
Chatters. What's a chatter?
A chatter is one of our Honey, We Need to Chat fam bam on the subscription platforms, Patreon and or Spotify subscription at the moment.
If you are not a chatter, go check out Patreon or Spotify subscription. We got extra episodes there. Also, it helps us out a lot. We're really trying to work at growing this podcast. We've had such an incredible season so far in the 2 months that we've been running. We're just over 2 months we've been running. We'd love to grow. We'd love to really invest more time in this. So yeah, if you would like to, we'd love your support over at Patreon.
Extra content, extra input. The chatters have been really engaged and inputting into the content. They've been giving us suggestions for would you rathers. They've been giving us suggestions for outros, that kind of thing. So if you're interested in being a bit more involved, hop on over.
Yeah.
But anyway, today one of our chatters has sent in an actual audio recording, so you get to hear his voice, which is exciting for us.
Yeah.
That's not the only way you can send in stories. If you want to send in a story, please feel free to email us at honeyweeneedachat@gmail.com. It can be anonymous. It can be as secretive as you want, but this is a special edition where he has sent in his own voice explaining his story. But before we get to that, we're going to break some ice.
So the first would you rather is, would you rather clog the toilet on a first date or first day at a new job?
First day at a new job. Not even...
Oh, no, I thought you said first date.
Heck no.
Yeah, I'd rather first date. Well, yeah, because first day at a new job, you've got everyone there. You're going to be the toilet clog guy or girl. First date.
But a job, but people don't have, like at a job, it's like, I don't know. I would way prefer that than...
No, because like later on, you're more like, for me, I envision that you would later on joke about it with your potential partner in the future, where at work, there'd be the talk behind the back. That's the guy that clogged the
but I would rather that.
Really?
But you know what? You can get around it at work. And I may have done this before.
What did
you want to hear? I have two stories.
Okay.
I don't know if you want to hear them, but they're very funny.
Go for it.
Number one.
Number one or number two?
Number one. I went to the bathroom. It wasn't purely my fault, just to be clear. But I went to the bathroom at an establishment that I was working at. And it would not flush after I went to the bathroom, like for multiple reasons. And so I just went up to the manager and I was like, someone has clogged the bathroom. Just letting you know, someone's clogged the bathroom. Because it was in the disabled toilets. That's where we went because it was... And so she's like, oh, thank you for letting me know.
So much of your secretive lies will be coming out in this podcast.
Yeah. Well, do you want to know an even worse one that includes you?
No.
You don't want to know?
I mean, yes.
Yeah. All right. This is funny because these two instances that you brought up
on me?
No. I used to live next door to friends when we first started. No, it was early on in our relationship.
Yeah.
And I lived in a very, very small apartment.
What did I do?
No, you didn't do anything.
Oh.
It wasn't you. But you were coming over and I really needed to go to the bathroom. But I was like, I'm not going to do it in my apartment because this is such a bad story and I feel like I'm going to regret. I've never told you this. I really apologize if you'll know exactly who you are. I apologize about everything I'm about to say. They weren't there. They had gone away. And I had their key.
No.
And so I was like, I'll go to their bathroom. And because if I went in my apartment, it would just not be pleasant. It's such a small space. We were still early on. I think we might have actually been engaged. I don't know. But so I went in there and then I remembered that they used to talk about their toilet had a lot of issues with plumbing, so it wouldn't flush properly. And it didn't flush properly. But I was like, that's all right. I've got their key. I'm cleaning their house while they're gone. So I've got their key. I'll come back later and I'll fix it. And so you came over. I was a bit like flustered because I didn't know when you were going to come. You came over, we hung out and whatever. And then I suddenly remembered that I'd left their key on their bench and I'd locked their house. And I was like,
no.
Oh my gosh. Not only have I not cleaned their house, I've left something in the bathroom that if I don't explain, they're going to come home to this. And so you were over. And so I was like freaking out. I don't know if you remember this. I was like,
do I break into their house?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember that.
I was freaking out because I was like, oh, I've left their key. And I don't remember what excuse I gave you that I'd left the key there. But anyway.
Maybe you were starting to clean the house.
Maybe because I needed to clean the house. And so you didn't break into you broke into their house, but you didn't break anything, just to be clear.
Yeah.
I think you went through the laundry window or something.
Yeah.
And you got the key. But then I was like, if he goes in there and it's really bad, how am I going to like excuse this? Anyway, essentially you got in, got me the key and then came out and I was like super panicked. And so I somehow made some excuse of like, I just need to go check on something and left you in my apartment. And I just quickly went and dealt with it. It was fine after that, just to be clear. I think it had actually flushed itself or something. I don't know. Something weird.
Magical poop.
Oh my gosh. It wasn't poo because I don't do that.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah. So I've experienced both of these.
Rainbows.
I've experienced both of these scenarios and I would definitely pick the work one over the second. And I apologize to my friends if you hear this.
They were your friends.
They were my friends. Everything was fine, but it was a bit scary for a second. But heaven forbid I admit to my boyfriend/fiance or even my husband until we're 10 years down the track why I needed him to break into their house. So have we broken the ice?
Well, we've broken something.
We've broken our relationship. Yeah. Is that a child?
No, I think it was actually my throat.
I really broke something.
It was like a wheeze breath laugh thing. I don't know.
Did you have another one? Not another wheeze. Did you have another? Would you rather?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got one more.
Do you still love me?
Look.
Are you still attracted to me?
I've got another question. None of that ever bothers me, by the way.
I know, but we're not super gross people like that. Though.
No.
Super open with that stuff. We get teased about that a little bit sometimes.
Yeah. We don't go to the we're not the couple that goes to the bathroom in front of each other.
Or fart in front of each other.
No, we don't.
Intentionally.
We don't do that. Unless you are about to have a baby and then you have epidural.
I've had epidural, yeah.
And then you just fluff your guts
off. And I can't stop. Yeah.
All right, this is more of a phobia one.
Okay.
Would you rather be stuck in a phone box with 10 snakes or 10 tarantulas?
10 tarantulas.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, easy.
Yeah, that's all. That's all I had.
Because the snakes could jump. Like, I was just thinking, like, I could do that, wedge myself against the top if I need to, and the tarantulas, like, crawl.
No, they go up the side.
Yeah, but snakes jump. Like, you would be... Yeah, they...
Well, yeah, I know, but if they're trying to eat you, which snakes don't do, I don't think they'll be trying to... I
would just die.
I reckon, actually, now that you said that, I actually reckon snakes.
You think tarantulas are going to try and eat me?
No, but they will climb up the sides and then climb on you if you're up there.
Yeah, but are they as poisonous? It depends on the type of snake and the type of... Well, I guess tarantula is the type of spider. If they were pythons, then I would go snakes.
Yep.
If they were anything from here, then I would go spiders.
Anything from Australia.
Tarantulas, yeah. Cool.
That's all.
Well, I feel like the ice has been broken.
The ice has broke.
Well, in that case, let's move on to the stories. So today's theme is it stonewalling? ? And if you have not listened to our 4 Horsemen episode, I suggest actually jumping across to that one and starting with that, because we essentially run through the Gottman Institute. John Gottman is a relationship psychologist, incredibly clever man. And the Gottman Institute have this concept called the 4 Horsemen, which the 4 communication styles or relationship styles that indicate that your relationship is not heading in a great direction. And stonewalling is one of them. So if you haven't listened to that one, definitely have a listen to that first, because it will step you through all 4 of them, and they all connect to each other. Then come right back to this one. Because we're going to deep dive a little bit more into, is it stonewalling? And the reason I'm questioning that is it's not always going to be stonewalling. So just be Stonewalling could be like a bit of one of those, what do they call them? Trigger words, or like a tokenistic word, probably, a trending word, maybe. And so I don't think that it's all going to be stonewalling.
We're keen to dig into that.
Yeah, let's dig right in.
Honey, we need to chat.
So, first of all, we're going to start with our chatter.
Hey, chatter.
Let's listen to the chatter.
Hey there, Amy and Blair. I'm a father of 2 and have been married to my beautiful wife for coming on 13 years now. We have an amazing relationship. We're both incredibly tolerant and understanding of each other's shortcomings and very rarely disagree or get upset with each other. This is a great thing, but also leans into the issue that I'd be interested to hear your opinion on. Because we don't get upset with each other much, we also don't tend to openly discuss when we are upset. Instead, we are both guilty of stonewalling, as you both put in an earlier episode. If we encounter an uncomfortable situation, one of us will tend to shut down and wait for the negative feelings to pass by. They always do, but I'm aware that doing this leaves issues that could be resolved with open discussion. So here's the question. How would you open up a dialogue about something that your partner has done to upset you when you know that one of you is upset and could potentially go into that fight or flight and shut down? I know this is an issue that doesn't have an easy solution. The old just communicate, isn't gonna do it, as we need to set that safe space up. And if one of us is upset, setting up the safe space becomes very tricky. Keep up the great conversation, peeps, and love from me and everyone else at Dawnhaven.
Cool.
Awesome.
Well, thank you, Chatter, for sending that in. And I just want to start by saying your voice is very soothing.
And we made a comment after we heard it the first time. Yeah. What did you say? You said...
He's good. I don't know, but
it's very soothing.
You've got an epic voice. So
yeah.
It's very, I don't know what the word is, like classic or
I feel like I'm sitting down at my granddad's fire and I'm watching my granddad in a dressing gown, drinking a whiskey.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
And telling a story with
I'm
a
just
pipe
picturing
and a
your
cigar.
granddad. And that's not...
It's
not
a granddad.
A granddad.
A nice Santa Claus type granddad.
I just picture someone in an Audible recording booth recording an audiobook.
That's less creepy, yeah.
That is a little bit less ageist. Anyway, thank you very much for sending in that story. Really appreciate your vulnerability and your support.
Absolutely.
In more than just being our chatter. So thank you for that. But yeah, really, really common dynamic that plays out in relationships. So I thought before we dive too deeply into workshopping that, I might just quickly refresh on what exactly stonewalling is. And just so that we've got that in our heads as we dive into these stories. So the Gottman Institute refer to stonewalling as withdrawing from interaction, shutting down, or not responding. It often occurs in response to contempt, which I'll cover in a second, and can signal overwhelming negativity. If you feel like you're stonewalling during a conflict, stop the discussion and ask your partner to take a break. So contempt is another one of the 4 horsemen. And the interesting thing about the 4 horsemen is they, like I kind of mentioned earlier, they lead into each other. They can kind of flow into each other or interact a little bit there. So this is suggesting that stonewalling often follows contempt, and contempt is disrespect, sarcasm, mockery, or insults towards your partner. It implies moral superiority and can make your partner feel despised or worthless. So obviously that would be, if that's a pattern of communication from your partner, you're likely to be reacting from a not constructive place as well. And that's where stonewalling can sometimes come in. So just to give you that context, that's what the Gottman Institute on their website has listed. And a quick defining note as well, because as I was going through these stories, like I mentioned, I was like, is it stonewalling? And I don't want to be quick to be like, oh, stonewalling. Just like people are like quick to say, oh, he's a narcissist, or, you know, to throw those things around, say I've got trauma. And there's words that become widely used that maybe aren't quite accurate. So I did a quick search to see if there was an easy definition defining the difference between stonewalling and maybe just needing space or just being overwhelmed or something like that. And I saw an article by psychotherapist Marnie Fuhrman. from the blog verywellmind.com. And she said in there that there are a few different ways that stonewalling might appear in a relationship. There's one which is unintentional stonewalling, which is often a learned response that partners use to cope with difficult or emotional issues, to avoid escalating a fight or avoid discussing an uncomfortable topic. They also might be afraid of their partner's reaction. And then intentional stonewalling. In extreme cases, stonewalling is used to manipulate a situation, maintain control in the relationship, or inflict punishment. If you think your partner is verbally abusing you, speak with a counselor or therapist. So it can actually be a form of abuse and manipulation in an intentional context. There are also healthy behaviors that can be mistaken for stonewalling. It's important to note that stonewalling is not the same thing as asking for space or setting boundaries. Asking for time or space requires communication. When your partner asks to discuss something later with the full intention of coming back to the conversation, they are not stonewalling you.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to clarify that because I don't want to just fall into that trap of being like, oh, stonewalling, cut it off. So that is from psychotherapist Marnie Fuhrman. All right. So this recording from our chatter, really common.
Yeah.
That's a really, really common thing. And I think something we've navigated a little bit, probably more so on my side, just not shutting down and not knowing how to talk about the stuff, but really common. So just to start us off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're not alone in that journey at all.
I think a lot of the things that we will be talking about and a lot of the stories that we read, and some of them might be quite extreme, but I don't think any of them will be unique to those stories, those people writing in. What we want to be doing is normalizing struggles, normalizing the growth, you know, because when we do that, we kind of give ourselves a little bit of a break. We never excuse behavior, but we just, when we normalize the feeling, normalize the struggle, I feel like we can take a bit more of a breath, and then we can be like, all right, cool. Well, this isn't unique to me. I can do something about it.
Absolutely that, because I feel like there are so many things in the world right now that you're not given grace and space to work through and wrestle with. It's a very hard line.
Yeah.
And so unless you are given that space for your feelings and your struggle to be normalized, how will you ever grow? That just means we're cutting off a huge portion of the population in whatever topic it is.
Yeah.
Saying, no, that's actually not okay. And it's not just not okay. It's actually not okay for you to be wrestling with that behavior or that reaction or that emotion. So you just cut them off rather than encouraging people in that place to grow. And I can understand where it comes from, because there's people that have caused horrible hurt to people. And so I can understand this kind of like hardline reaction, but I think it's gone so far the other way that we have a whole range of topics that there's no grace, there's no like space for people to explore that in a safe place, in an encouraging place that encourages you to be better. You just are encouraged to not be that, which is, I think, really damaging.
I had a meeting today, and not to sideline too much or go down a rabbit hole too much, but had a meeting today with a bunch of workmates and leaders and volunteers about the groups we run for dads. And they were talking a lot about how they're running breakfast for these dads. And just to start the conversation, just got dads talking, right? And a lot of the feedback that they're getting is, you know, I haven't really seen guys open up. I've never felt like I can share. I feel like I'm either not allowed any emotion, or the emotion that I'm allowed is anger. And, you know, and that's what's been modeled to us. It's either no emotion or anger. Not every guy, but these are the lot of guys that we're interacting with and working with. And so this is a big thing of what we want to do. And I love that our chat is a guy, because we want to be saying like, hey, being a man does not mean you show no emotion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Being a man does not mean that you're just angry. We can be vulnerable, and we should be vulnerable. We should be aware. And I hear this a lot from our chatter, is like they're actually very self-aware. I had a chat with them afterwards, after they sent this recording in over Patreon, and talking about how for them it is an issue and they want to work on it and get better at it. But he gets into this point where he gets frustrated and he feels like he stonewalls, like so he won't engage in a conversation anymore. Then a little bit later, he'll be like, oh, I shouldn't have even got that frustrated before. And then he's just like, well, I just won't bring it up.
Yeah.
And I think there's even stuff in there as well
100%.
that we could be discussing too. But props to you, mate. Being vulnerable, being intentional, being self-aware. I love that we get to model that and grow in that too.
And even, this is a really simple thing, but being a man doesn't mean that you can't engage with the dynamics in your relationship and workshop them yourself.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of, in the cliche space at least, a lot of men are led to that place by their partner. I don't know if it's because maybe they feel like they just can't, or it's not normal for them to be like workshopping.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, it's not normal to show weakness, vulnerability. This is a big thing for a lot of guys. And again, not every guy, but a lot of guys really struggle with that. It's like, I'm not meant to show weakness. I'm not meant to show feelings. I'm meant to be hard, firm, and get to it, you know? And that's what we're breaking the mold on.
Yeah. And if you are a man and you're listening to this and something in your relationship doesn't feel healthy, take a sec. Just take a sec and be like, okay, I'm not going to just wait for my partner to nag at me about something or to constantly bring things up. I'm actually going to sit there and be like, what can I do to engage in this better? What can I do to look into what's happening for us? So I love this as well, this question that's been sent in. I think that's incredible because it's coming from him and he's aware of what's going on for him, which is a huge step.
Well done.
I think straight off the bat, the stonewalling, if we're going to call it stonewalling, because obviously I don't really know what happens in that situation. I think the stonewalling reaction can be for so many reasons. And like was kind of alluded to in some of these definitions, it can be because of how you were raised and what was shown to you or what was done to you when you felt emotion. You can shut down because of that. Like for me, my trap with this is that I wrestle with, I've seen stonewalling play out and it was very unhealthy. I've also seen this like hounding of needing someone to answer you right away. And that was really unhealthy. And so I fall into this gap personally where I'm like, I don't want to be naggy and like in the moment just attacky to you. And so I try to take a sec to like not be in the moment. I try to. But then I can also fall into the trap of just not bringing up the thing that I need to bring up. And so either it will come out later in a not healthy way or it won't come out, but it'll just snowball. Like it'll just it'll just make everything else feel worse. And so then it's not helpful either. Yeah. How you're raised, what you've seen, who you are personality wise, and the dynamic between the two of you can all input into how you react in that moment. For me, the biggest answer to this kind of thing is easing the tension of that moment, recognizing like you have that you're not great in the moment reacting to this conversation. And that is okay because you do not need to be great in the moment reacting to someone's accusation or complaint or emotions or whatever it is. You don't need to have a great reaction in that stage. You need to have a loving reaction in that stage.
Yeah.
Like you're responsible to still be kind and loving. But if that means literally just saying to your partner, I can't talk right now.
Yeah.
I'll talk later. That's okay. That's actually an okay. The person might not love that. I don't always love that when we've done that. But as long as you can communicate, like that definition said, if you can communicate that you will come back to it and then you also come back to it, which I know you said is where he wrestles as well, that eases that tension. I feel like that eases the tension in the moment so that you're not feeling like I have to react now, but I'm not reacting. And then you just get stuck in the fact that you're not reacting. I feel like that would just be like a downward spiral. Instead, just having almost like outside of any disagreement or issue or anything, having a discussion and saying, hey, I'm super aware that I stonewall. Like I'm really aware that I do that. So if that happens, we need to have almost like a trigger word or something that this means I will come back to it. I just can't talk right now. Like I'm just struggling. I'm shutting down. I can't get my brain to engage in this conversation.
We don't have a word.
No,
we literally just say, look, I can't talk right now.
Yeah.
I'll come back to it.
Yeah.
And I think coming back to it is an important thing. You know, even how he says, so he's brought up two things. One in his message, but secondly, what I mentioned afterwards that we spoke about. So the first thing is that he's asking, like, how do you start the conversation? And I think it's really about, you know, we look at a struggle that we have, say stonewalling, and we're like, how do I address stonewalling? You know, and we have something specific that we want to address. And what we really want to encourage is that it's really about the culture that you foster within your relationship with your partner. And this has been really important for us. So again, if we don't have date nights, if we don't have these conversations, we get stagnant. We struggle with communicating. We really do. But especially since we've been doing the podcast, I find that because the things that we're discussing, we're actually implementing in our own arguments, in our own conversations. And so we've really fostered and grown a culture within our relationship to have these conversations. So get onto those date nights that we spoke about, at-home date nights, get onto those, or have a games night, but it's a night, it's also intentional. So it's not just games, but it's a time where you come and you discuss your relationship. It's not just a time where you come and bring up the difficult conversations, because you're going to be dreading those nights every single time. But how are you investing in your relationship? In next week's episode, we're going to be sharing something that we believe is a really, really great resource to help those conversations. But looking at, possibly a book or a reel or a podcast episode that you've listened to, hey, this podcast is a good idea. Bring those up as topics and say, hey, what are your thoughts? So don't come in with an agenda. Don't come in with, I want to bring up these difficult topics. Just come in investing in the relationship, and have that approach. And then everything that we've had to discuss comes up anyway. You know what I mean? The things that we're growing. There's sometimes we have to bring out something specific, but that's less shocking because we're already in a place where we bring stuff up.
Yeah. I think I've had more things that just sit on my brain. I'm like, how can I bring this up? When can I bring this up? How can I bring this up? When can I bring this up?
Absolutely. And I do too. Remember how last week we was a chat jar, and I'm like, I don't know how to bring it up. When can I bring it up, and whatever else? And it was sitting on my mind, and it was stirring and stirring and stirring until I could figure out how to do it. Then I brought it up, and it blew up because I didn't.
Well, it didn't blow up.
No, sorry.
Yeah, it wasn't a smooth conversation.
Exactly, because I hadn't. Yeah, I've been sitting on it, and it was new to you. But my point is setting the culture in relationship. So rather than just coming at it, look, we haven't really been able to talk about it. How do we talk about it? Well, I don't think you just bring it up. Well, I don't think you have to only just bring it up.
I think a really, really helpful thing for us, for me at least, was there was a time where we implemented, it wasn't just a date night, it was a check-in night. And a friend of mine suggested it on Instagram once. I think it asked a question. I can't remember where it came from, but basically you set aside a time every week and you make that your special check-in night. And you literally do have an agenda. It's not an agenda like my agenda. It's an agenda that you work on together, and you figure out what are the things we want to check in on every week. So it will be things like, how are we going with our love languages, or how are we going with physical intimacy, or how are we going budget wise? Also, is there anything that you would like to raise? And so it gives a space where you know it's coming up. I've had times when we did that where I was like, I don't really want to bring this up. But the amazing thing about it is, say it was Monday nights, I think it was Monday nights for us, something might have happened on Wednesday or something. And I was like, I need to talk to Blair about this. By the time Monday comes around, it gives me enough time to be like, is this serious enough? If yes, I'll raise it. If no, I'm good. No, it's resolved itself. I was just moody or whatever is going on. It gives space for that. But it also gives a space where when things are brought up, it's not some kind of shock. It's not like I'm cornering you in the kitchen one day and I'm just like, hey, when you said that thing to me, it really made me upset. It's we actually have a time set aside where we can reflect on this stuff. We know it's coming. We're outside of the emotions. We know we will still feel emotions when you talk about it, but we know that that's what this time is for. But instead of also just making all the negative things, you'd make it special. So you do that thing have a board game that you play, or have a movie or show that you watch just on that night, or get takeaway or make a hot chocolate. Something about it, make it special too. So it's not just the difficult things that you start to dread. And then when one person's like, oh, I can't be bothered doing that tonight. And the other person's like, yeah, me neither. You make it special and you commit to it.
Yeah.
That can be a really good way for starting that culture that Blair's talking about, just starting that culture of being able to communicate if it's not a natural thing that's happening right now. And I think if I reflect, I actually think that was a bit of a turning point for me, because until then I really struggled to know when to raise things. And it would just sit on my brain. And like I said, it would snowball. So I would be, annoyed about this one thing or hurt by this one thing. And so then everything that Blair would do would feel like another thing. So then when I had that check-in and I was able to communicate what I needed to communicate, I actually realized not everything that he was doing was annoying me. It was just that I was irritated and hurt because of whatever, or felt misunderstood, whatever the thing is. And when you're in that space, you're not like just before we started recording, I was overwhelmed and Blair was trying to joke around and I was like, I'm not really joking around right now.
Yeah.
It's not that he's annoyed. Like what he was doing wasn't actually
It was annoying to you.
Annoying. Well, it wasn't really annoying. I was just in a space where I'm like, I don't have that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, when you're wrestling with something bigger or something that's more serious, it's hard to just set that aside and be normal. So I feel like for me, that was a really practical, really easy way. And I feel like if it's not something that comes naturally in your relationship, it's not too hard to suggest that tactic.
No.
And just like say, when I stonewall in these conversations, I shut down, and I really hate that I shut down. I'm aware that that's not helpful. But then I don't want to rock the boat later, which was a huge thing for me. I didn't want to rock the boat later when things felt okay.
Mm.
And so bringing something up just was like, why would I do that? But if you don't bring it up, you will find yourself stonewalling again, and you'll find yourself getting more bitter. And that's when the other 4 horsemen can come into place, which is things like contempt and criticism and defensiveness, because you haven't been able to communicate through the more simple things that then snowball.
Yeah.
And so having that check-in that was like, I'm not great at this. So can we have a night where I actually am kind of forced to confront the things I need to confront? And then that led to a place where we don't really need a specific check-in at this stage, because it just kind of comes up when it needs to come up for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing I wanted to talk about was when he was saying about how, after a while, he's like, oh, it's not a big deal. Because like you said, sometimes, just let it go. Like it's not a big deal to bring up, and that's fine. But if you stonewalled me in a conversation and you didn't give me anything, it might not be a big deal to you anymore. Yeah. But your reaction can actually sit in my mind.
Yeah, 100%.
And I'm like, why did she shut down? Like, what's going on for you? And that's where I was just encouraging him, like, it might be good still to revisit and not necessarily bring up, dive back into the issue, because if that's not an issue anymore, that's fine. But together discuss, why did you stonewall? Why was that an issue for you in that moment? Why do you think you reacted like that? And together diving into that, I think is really, really powerful and really impactful. And I love doing that with you. Like after we've had a heated conversation, and then we go back through, like, why did we respond about that? Reflecting on it. I learned so much more about you, and I learned so much more about myself. Because a lot of the times I'm like, why did I react that way?
100%.
Why did I respond that way? Why did I shut down? And then unpacking that together is really, really cool. So that's what I would encourage as well. Yeah. Still revisit the conversation and unpack that together. You don't necessarily need to unpack the issue if it's not a non-issue now, but it's just a growth opportunity. It's just for you, a chance for you guys to bond more, to get more closer, more intimate, and grow together.
Yeah, because stonewalling goes 2 ways. So there's a recipient and there's a person that does it. I don't know what the word for that is.
A giver.
A precipient, I don't know. The person who's doing it. Or there's 2 people doing it at the same time. But so it's got 2 sides to it. One is how it is received. And we're going to dive into that in more stories, because like I said, it might not always be stonewalling. What's going on for the person may not be stonewalling. For the person doing it, it might not be, I'm stonewalling because, I'm shutting down. It might actually be, I am so overwhelmed, my brain is not functioning. Their intention isn't stonewalling. But to the recipient, it is stonewalling because they know no different. And so I was just thinking as you were talking, for you stonewall in that moment, shut down, and then later the issue's not a big deal. Your partner has received that stonewalling, is probably hurt, frustrated, disappointed, confused, whatever the thing is, by the stonewalling, by the lack of engagement in that scenario. And then either it's just left undone for them, like you said, it could still be an issue for them, not the issue itself, but the actual engagement. Or, if it's a pattern for them as well, which it may be if they're seeing this reflected all the time, they may then go into stonewalling. So from your perspective, you're like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. It's all okay now. But they're actually stonewalling. Like, so it could just become something that builds on itself. And so absolutely. And the one thing that I didn't read, but I will just now, in the Gottman summary of stonewalling, is they talk about the antidote to stonewalling. And their antidote is physiological self-soothing. I couldn't say that the first time, and I can't say it this time. But basically recognizing, so they say, recognize the signs of stonewalling and take a break from the discussion. Physiologically self-soothe by engaging in calming activities for at least 20 minutes. So that means if you know you're getting heated as you come into a situation or a conversation, and you can feel those walls going up where the stonewalling is about to start, you can start to train yourself to be aware of your triggers before they happen, which we've had to do in different scenarios as well. Feeling like, okay, I'm getting to this point, and I know once I get past that point is kind of too far, and putting a fail safe, is that the word? In at that stage where a circuit breaker or something, so that you're like, no, I'm not going to go further down that way. I can feel that happening. So I need to go do my 20 minutes of self-soothing, whatever that might be, mindfulness, shower, going for a walk, going outside and looking at the mountains, something like that, to calm yourself. So being aware of those things. But the interesting little example that they gave, they did an exercise or an experiment on, I think it was 30 couples, where they interrupted couples after 15 minutes of an argument. And they just said that they needed to fix something tech-wise, so they had to come in and take a break. And so they interrupted these couples and they asked them to go sit separately while they fixed this tech, but they just wanted them to read magazines. That's all they wanted to do. And then when they started to talk again, their heart rates were way lower and the interaction was way more productive and way more positive. And so basically they figured out that during that time, because they were reading magazines, they were separated, they were physiologically soothing themselves by reading and avoiding discussion. So they calmed down. And once they were calm, they were actually able to communicate a lot better. So, the suggestion is taking that time, which we've kind of suggested, if you're getting overwhelmed, being like, I can't talk about this right now, and taking the time you need until you have calmed down to talk about it. But the really important key, and the reason I'm bringing this up again, is it's not time to take away and be like, they said this, I'm a victim. And they say this on the Gottman side as well, to avoid the thoughts of indignation and victimhood. So you're not sitting there just being like, how dare they? Yeah. And then having the argument in your head and then reinforcing the argument. Take that time to be like, why am I reacting this way? Especially if you feel that stonewalling in yourself, take that time and be like, where does this come from? And why am I reacting this way? Or what is it that they said that triggered me so much? Especially if your relationship's usually healthy and you get along really well, there's got to be something that's triggering that. So you reflect internally. And even if you're the recipient of stonewalling and you've been put into one of these breaks, instead of sitting there and be like, they always do this, they always shut down and they never want to communicate, and why are they stonewalling? You could take a sec and reflect on yourself. Why am I so triggered? Why am I feeling this way? And maybe even take a sec and be like, I've recognized this pattern in my partner that they stonewall. And so why might they be stonewalling? And instead of it being like they're doing this to me, taking that moment to be curious, like we've suggested, and be like, why do they do this? Like, is there anything I know about them that might play into this? And if you can switch that break, I reckon that's a game changer. It's not just about having a break. Everyone just has their little argument in the bathroom at the mirror and they get more angry and then they come back.
Is that what you do?
Have you never done that? Are you kidding me?
Don't do that. I'm serious. Is that actually a thing?
Oh, 100%.
I'm just picturing you walking into the bathroom. You're like,
I even made a TikTok about it one time. I don't know if I posted it. It was just like what you do in the bathroom, and it was like me at my mirror, and you don't talk, but you go like.
Why?
So, because it's not talking, but it's like talking.
Why?
I don't know. Don't ask me this question. I'm a normal person.
Are you?
I'm a normal person.
I mean, yes, you are.
I know you have arguments in your head.
Oh, no. Yeah, definitely in my head, but not in front of a mirror.
This is what Blair does. He has arguments in his head and his hands just get like clenchy, and I can just see him like, and his jaw's clenching and his eyes are going all over.
Yeah, because I could have moved.
See, mine's not that much weirder.
It's quite a bit weirder. I put it up to the weirdness.
I'm just releasing the energy. You're just holding it inside.
Yeah, but you're looking at yourself, getting angry at yourself.
Why am I getting so defensive in this moment? I don't know. Basically, I think being helpful to yourself. If you know that you can't communicate well, you know this pattern, you're aware of it because you've just shared it with us. What is a way that you can still communicate that even to your partner? And maybe you have, but even just a lot of these stories, like just having a sec when you're outside of the emotions, saying to your partner, I really struggle and I don't like that I struggle. I'm aware that that's not helpful. in the moment and workshopping with them. What can we do that's going to make this better? What would make it better for you? What's going to make it better for me? When do I see it escalating that I need to intervene? Or, what's a way we can put something in place like a check-in where we have the emotions removed and it's actually just for communication. So we know that's what's expected of us. Being your own helper in that, I think, is a really helpful way of navigating it.
Something since doing this podcast, I have realized how numb I am to the thought of you being frustrated at me outside of when we're talking. Seriously.
You don't care?
No, it's not that I don't care. I just no, you're good. It just does not enter my mind. I'm just so oblivious. Okay, just picturing you yelling at yourself in the mirror.
Well, it's not usually about you.
Oh.
Sometimes it's about you.
Yeah, okay.
And it doesn't happen that often. It used to happen more. Like as a teenager or something.
Yeah, but just I don't know. It's good. It's refreshing to be like, oh no, I've still got some stuff. I've still got to work on some stuff. We've still got a way to go. It's actually refreshing to know that you get frustrated at me.
Do you get frustrated at me?
Very rarely.
See, this is a weird dynamic.
Yeah, very rarely.
But
we had a conversation today. I feel I bring a lot more baggage to the relationship than
which
you do.
We did discuss, and I don't agree with that. I think everybody brings baggage, and I don't think it's a helpful or even possible, to some extent, exercise to weigh that baggage. It's not. You can't compare baggage to baggage.
Yep.
And your baggage and your way of functioning is very external. It's very loud and obvious and straight away and dealt with quickly, but it's also gone quickly.
And most of them are, yeah.
Yeah, but whereas mine's a lot more slow burn, not super obvious, kind of seeps into a lot of the ways that I function. So I don't think it's a fair thing to...
I think it's more that I feel that my stuff, because it's external loud, it impacts others more.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's where I feel like the impact is different. So yours is quieter, and yes, it might be more impactful for you, but mine I feel is more impactful for others.
I know how you could feel that way, but if I'm bitter at you or frustrated at you silently in my head, and that's coming out, and how
that's what I'm saying. I'm naive to it.
I know, but but you do, even before, you're like, "Are you annoyed at me?" Because I was overwhelmed. You do see it play out.
Yeah.
And same with my family. It comes out with the kids and in the way that I interact with my house and that kind of thing. So I think. Again, I just think it's different. And I wouldn't want someone like me. I would be really mad. I would really struggle with someone like me.
But that's what I mean. Because in my head, it's so internal for you. So again, this is the refreshing part, is I feel like I'm seeing more of what's going on inside. Yeah. And that's great, because now it's like, oh, cool. I'm seeing
this. And he's messed up too.
Yeah, we're messed up together. No, but there's... it's refreshing to know that we're growing together, because up until now, I feel like I felt like I was the main one putting baggage on my family.
I'm really sad about that, because that's absolutely not the case.
Yeah. But again, it's just the beauty of communicating, the beauty of digging deep is I get to see that side. And I feel
you can see all the baggage I'm putting in.
But I feel like I'm actually more a part of your baggage now, where before, because I didn't know about it.
Which is a really, really good example of the benefits of working on stonewalling.
Yeah.
Because I know firsthand how hard it can be to navigate stonewalling. And I think the erosion that can do to there's so many things that erode relationships, just to be clear. But the erosion it can do in just a really almost subtle but super damaging way is huge if it's not dealt with. That's why it's one of the 4 horsemen. And I think it's also why it's not something that's super well understood, because it's not necessarily something we hear. We hear criticism. We hear that all the time. We know what criticism is. We know what defensiveness is. What's the other one? Contempt is a weird word, but bitterness or hate basically is what that is. We know those things. Stonewalling's subtle, but it's just as bad.
Do you feel like you struggle with stonewalling?
I think I'm much more than you. Yeah. And I definitely have had moments where I have, but I think we've got really good practical stuff in place. I can see my brain doing it. And I think that's one positive too, is it's just because this is a pattern doesn't mean it's how you are or how you have to be or how you have to interact for the rest of your relationship. Like, that's not it at all. You've recognized a pattern and you can then work on it. And that's one cool thing about these patterns is they are reversible. There are things you can work on. They talk about the antidotes with these things. So it's actually almost exciting because it's like, oh man, how much space is there to grow, like to be closer.
And there is another way.
And there is another way.
That's really, really important to state. And again, going back to guys, a lot of guys just want to see that there's another way, you know, and I'm just so passionate about that, of sharing these things for people like myself, guys, girls, whatever, to be seeing that there is another way. We can actually grow on these things. So when we find something that we're struggling with, we can do something about it.
Yeah,
you know?
personally.
We can work on it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Really appreciate
the story.
Question. Is your jumper inside out?
Oh, I meant to say that. And even when we were doing that chat just then, I was like, oh, I need to say that. And I still didn't. Yes, it is. And this is the reason why.
Tell me.
All of my jumpers are branded. And not just branded, but branded with like companies or organizations we've worked with.
Or camps we've been on.
So I don't really
and
want
we're ashamed of all
I'm
of
not
them.
ashamed of them. I think they'd be ashamed of me. I genuinely don't want to put their name to our stuff just for their sake. So yes, I do need to get, we both need to get non-branded hoodies, especially as winter is upon us.
Or we can do our own branded hoodies,
which is also an option. But we've got to figure that out. That's a whole thing.
Yeah.
So yes, my jumper is inside out. Please ignore it. I've also got tons of our golden retriever hair. I was like, I feel like a black hoodie today. And then I put it on and realized my golden retriever is blonde. Golden, you might even say. So we're going to dive into some Reddit stories now on stonewalling as well. We'll hear some of these stories, workshop them, how we would navigate them if this was us. Hey guys, just wanted to pop in and take a sec to talk about the extra content you can find over on our Patreon and our Spotify subscription. We have a fun little community growing over there with extra episodes, extra stories. We're also going to have resources, messages back and forth, and also submitting listener stories through that portal as well. So
also outro themes.
If you want to be a part of our closer knit community here at Honey We Need a Chat, please hop on over to Patreon or Spotify subscriptions and join us there. We would love to see you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks. So the next story is titled Stonewalling and Argument Escalation. During a recent argument with my significant other, me, 30s male, her, late 20s female, she pointed out that I have a habit of stonewalling her. After taking some time to read up on it, I realized that's exactly what I do. I become defensive, emotionally withdraw, and try to de-escalate by stopping the argument or walking away to cool down. However, despite her recognizing that I'm getting emotionally flooded to the point where I can't rationally respond, she doesn't seem to understand that I need to stop. I've recognized that if I don't end up taking a break from the argument, I'll just become increasingly defensive and eventually lash out and say things I will always regret afterwards. I've told her that before several times, but it still seems like me stonewalling her is the only thing she sees as an issue. Not that she keeps laying an emotional barrage on me when I'm clearly at my limits. While articles will discuss the importance of letting someone who's emotionally exhausted take a break, they also oftentimes seem to place the blame entirely on the person engaging in the stonewalling behavior. So my question is, how do I get her to recognize that I'm trying to stop the arguments from escalating further by taking a break from it for a moment? I know stonewalling behavior isn't healthy, especially since it seems to upset women so much. Anyway, but pushing someone further when they clearly need a break doesn't seem like a healthy option either. In general, we don't argue that much or that often, with the exception of very recently due to a lot of emotionally charged things going on. But when we do, it always seems to end up with me wanting to check out from the argument and her pressing me until I lash out and say something hurtful, which then causes the situation to further escalate until I end up sleeping on the couch and her being angry at me for days. Just to be clear, I think stonewalling would hurt anybody.
Yes. Yes.
There's a pattern of women experiencing stonewalling more, but I think no matter who's receiving it, it would upset them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is one, I think you said at the beginning, is it stonewalling?
Is it stonewalling, yeah.
And, well, first of all, he doesn't say that he says, I'll come back to this, does he? So he doesn't mention that, but I can completely relate to that overwhelmed feeling. You know, it's just like, oh man, like I feel like I'm terrible at debates. You know what I mean? Like I can have a conversation with someone, but when it comes to debates, I get overwhelmed and my brain just shuts down. And I'm like, I just can't, I don't agree with you. I know I don't agree with you. And I know I've got reasons, but I can't think of any reasons.
Yeah.
I can't actually think of what to say right now. So I completely relate to that overwhelmed feeling and just shutting down. Like, I don't know what to say right now. I don't know how to communicate to you right now. It's like in those moments for me, I feel like I'm a deer in headlights. Like my eyes is like, what? You want to what? Like, yeah.
I also understand, although I don't react the same way, but I know the moments where I'm just so overwhelmed that my brain doesn't think properly. And so it's actually great, I think, that he's recognized that that's what's happening for him. And I think you're right. The thing that came to mind when I read this was, he says in here, question is, how do I get her to realize I'm trying to stop the arguments from escalating further by taking a break for a moment? So potentially that is just it. Maybe he does want to come back to it and she just still doesn't really get it. In my thinking, I feel like if you prove yourself to be like, hey, I need to take a break, I will come back to this, and you prove that that's going to happen, I think your partner would start to trust that. And so if you're able to prove to them, you're able to say, not only do I need to take a break, but I'm going to come back to this. I promise you, I'm going to come back to this. And you actually follow through on that. She's going to have more confidence in that. I can imagine this playing out as a regular thing where he takes a break. He doesn't discuss the thing. He shuts down because he's too overwhelmed and he just doesn't come back. And that I can see being almost a panicked reaction from her perspective, being like, you don't come back. You're like, why can't you talk about this now? You don't come back. And almost like, we're in this. I need to discuss it. I'm not going to have closure. We're not going to be able to get closer or resolve this until we come back to it. But you never come back. You just shut down.
We had to learn this.
Yeah.
We had to learn this. I still remember that night in the rain.
I don't remember it very well, so I'm glad you remember.
It's like we
getting more romantic every time.
Then we made out. No. It's such a vivid moment because I feel like it was so many light bulbs that went off in my mind. And that's why I think I remember it so much. And you said this, you're like, I just can't talk about this right now. And it was hard for me to let go. I'm like, no, you won't, you know, and you had to build my trust in that. And it seems weird saying it, but you did. I had this maybe control issue because like if I was afraid that if you didn't bring it back up again, then we couldn't like talk about it. And whatever it was that we were talking about, I'm like, I don't want to keep coming back to this situation. So I want to address it. And I think it was this big drive for me back then too, because I'm like, I want to be better at communicating.
Yeah.
I want us to be a couple that communicate. Why won't you communicate with me? And so, I feel like we've definitely experienced that. And for me, it was a control thing, not out of me trying to be a controlling person, but I just wanted to be able to make sure that the conversation was going to happen. I completely agree with what you're saying, but don't expect that to happen that time. Like that trust to be built off one conversation.
And it won't be.
No, it won't It'll be like it took us multiple. We had to work on it for a while about, okay, I need you to trust me. And I believe this is sort of what you said. I need you to trust me. I will bring this up again. And I had to. And it was very, very, very hard. And we had to work on it a lot.
I want to know what we were talking about.
It's probably something really important.
I'm really intrigued.
I have no clue.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And you're saying that, this is a pattern and you're wrestling with it. You need her to understand. I think one quick challenge as well is you need to understand her side. So regardless of what's going on, you're wanting her to understand something, maybe take a sec and try to understand her side so that when you do come back to the conversation, you're not just, I need you to understand this. You do need her to understand this, but you also need to understand her. So if you can come to that conversation showing you've taken time to address and acknowledge what she might be experiencing, I think that will speak volumes. But outside of your emotions, outside of those moments, sit her down, say, hey, I really struggle. I'm sorry. I recognize that that's hard. I really, really struggle. My brain turns off and I can't process. And then I snap and I'm sorry. And I hate the things that I say to you because they're not true. I just need that space. So we need to figure out a way so that I can love you the way I need to love you in those conversations We can have the conversations we need to have, but so that I also am given space so that my brain can process and I can come back to it.
Because if he's trying to address that issue inside of a heated conversation, you're not going to get anywhere. Yeah. If you come at me later and you say, look, I'm trying to I shut down because you keep my barrier is going to be up, my wall's going to be up, and I'm going to be snappy back. It's just going to go straight back into the argument. If you came at me owning your stuff and you're like, look, this is something that I'm trying to work on. I hear what you're saying, how it's hard for you when I shut down and I stonewall, and I apologize for that. I really want to get better. Like, I just need you to commit with me that we're going to work on that together. But let's just explore that together. Why do I do it? You know, if I can explain that to you, or if you can explain that to me, my approach, if you come at it from that perspective, I'm like, yeah, I want to help you. Like, I definitely do want to help you. And then amongst that, I'm going to be like, oh, this is what I'm doing, and that's how you're reacting. It's going to be a lot more understanding, I feel.
Exactly. And like they said in the Gottman Institute explanation, instead of taking that time between whenever you're having these conversations or whatever break you do get or whenever you stop those conversations to just reinforce for yourself that she's victimizing you in this process, reflecting internally, getting yourself ready in that way, reflecting on what's happening for you and what might be happening for her is going to be so valuable. Yeah, because exactly that. If you come at it and you're like, you just keep shutting me down and she potentially has so many conversations that she, like, serious issues. Probably. Or into her pillow on her bed. She potentially has all these things that have happened. Like, because we're just talking about how the conversation is going down. We don't even know what you're discussing. And so I think that's, as the recipient to stonewalling, that would be something that I would wrestle with, because I'd be like, yeah, I get it. But the issue that we're actually discussing is also still an issue. So being careful to not overshadow the issue at hand as well, or overshadow her feelings that she might be navigating, I think is really important. So I think if you're asking what you do, you say, well, your question is, how do I get her to realize? And I think that's a touchy way of putting a question. Yes, that needs to happen. That's probably not the aim you need to have. Maybe more the question should be, how do I communicate this to my partner? How do I let her know where I'm coming from? Or how do I start that conversation? Or what can I do to help de-escalate myself? Especially if there's hurtful things being said. All of these things build on themselves. And so just because there's one part that is misunderstood from your side doesn't mean that it's going to be without emotional impact on her. And I think that's an important thing when you're addressing the conversation. Cool. Maybe we'll go on to the next one. Number tres. Número tres. Por favor.
Yes.
Okay. I think my 35 female boyfriend, 38 male, is chronically stonewalling me. So my boyfriend, 38 male, and I, 35 female, have been together for nearly 4 years. We live in a 900 square foot space with his 11-year-old daughter and our 2-month-old. Needless to say, we don't have a lot of privacy or personal space where we live. Since we've been together, whenever we fight and things start to escalate, he almost always says something like, I'm done with this conversation, or fine, you win, or we can't talk about this right now because my daughter might hear. Then proceeds to walk out or leave, sometimes for hours, and give me the cold shoulder and silent treatment all night. He usually wakes up the next day like nothing happened. Sometimes I just try to brush it under the rug, but most times I lose sleep over this type of behavior. I feel shut down every time he does this, and when I feel like we haven't come to a resolution and it's still heavy on my mind, I bring it up again in the morning. This usually leads to him throwing his hands up, getting upset and rolling his eyes and quickly apologizing. Most times I can tell he's just apologizing to move on and shut me up rather than actually acknowledging where I'm coming from. He claims he does this when the conversation is going in circles or he feels I don't listen. When that's not true at all, I listen to every word he says, I just disagree most of the time and want him to see my side. But when I relentlessly try to get him to see my side, that's when he throws his hands up and is over it. I will admit I tend to get defensive a lot of the time, and going forward I'm going to try to recognize this and respond healthier. I found out there's such a thing as stonewalling while Google searching this, and I think this is what I'm dealing with. I feel like our conflicts rarely actually come to a resolution. I rarely feel understood or acknowledged, and often am accused of not listening. Today I told him I'm on the verge of considering leaving him over this. I'm already losing sleep, being up with our newborn multiple times a night. I can't lose sleep over stressing about our relationship and constantly feeling alone and invalidated. I don't want him to feel not heard or validated, just like I equally want this reciprocated. My question is this stonewalling behavior? If so, how do we move forward with this in a healthier way of communicating? I want to work on this relationship for the sake of our daughter, and we have a great relationship other than this unhealthy way of dealing conflict.
First of all, it's really sad that she's considering leaving him.
I know, yeah.
So she says she's got a really healthy
relationship
other than this. And it's like, man, this is worth fighting for. Like I mean, people have their reasons, and I'm not one to tell them what they should and shouldn't do, but this is what we're fighting for, is healthy relationships and the fight for relationships and the fight for relationships to get stronger and better. And
for there to be one pattern that throws that out the window always boggles my mind.
Yeah.
And I don't know that that's always accurate, because I think one thing might be actually impacting a lot of things. But yeah, it does seem quite extreme. I think the thing that came to my mind when I was reading this was she talks about how she gets defensive. And one of the things, again, that they talk about in the Gottman Institute is defensiveness. So there's criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. And it's, again, a story that is very much on he's doing this thing. What is he doing? But she actually said that he, in the conversations, talks about how she doesn't listen. And she said that usually he throws up his hands when she's trying over and over and over to let him see her side. And so I was thinking, to me, this sounds like there's more communication dynamics at play than just him stonewalling. And if defensiveness is in that communication, that is a really tough thing to navigate as well. And from his perspective, could be just as difficult as navigating stonewalling. So I think I'm glad she's aware of it. And she said she's going to be more aware of that as she goes into these things. But I think defensiveness in an argument is super difficult to get past, just like stonewalling, because you're literally putting up a wall of defense. And so you don't get further. Like, it's almost like you just don't get past, yeah, but you do this. Or yeah, but I do this and this and this. So that doesn't matter. Like, those kinds of things talk you in a circle kind of the same way that stonewalling would.
We had a conversation last night about just something that our oldest boys are going through, and we spoke about how we would help each other, like, address the way that we speak to the boys so that they don't speak to each other that way.
Yeah.
Right. And how we'd pull each other up in a loving way. And you mentioned how you would really struggle with that, but you want to do it, but you would really struggle with that. Is that defensiveness?
Yeah.
From your side?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because not that I don't struggle with defensiveness, but because you brought it up last night, so I feel it's a bit more fresh.
Yeah.
How would you work on identifying that in yourself? And then how do you work on it when you've identified it?
That's a good question. I just quickly flicked back as well to what the Gottman Institute say about defensiveness too, because it is a tough one. They say the antidote is to accept responsibility, even if only for a part, and avoid blaming your partner, acknowledge your role in the issue. So I don't know. It's a good question. Defensiveness is definitely the one that I see play out the most with us, and for me in particular. It's really, I find it extremely hard when I'm misunderstood. So I understand her perspective of being like, I need him to understand my side. It really irks me to be misunderstood. And so that's usually where the defensiveness will come in. For me, I'll usually get defensive because I'm like, yeah, but you're pointing this out on me. But what about you do the same thing? This instance is my bad, but you do it all these other times. So I find that really hard because I'm like, I feel misunderstood. The reality is I still did the thing. And so I still need to own up to that. And so I think it's genuinely just quite a personal process to work on, because you need to become okay at accepting the fact that you're going to play a role in things. You're going to bring the baggage like we were talking about. You're going to bring those things to relationships. When there's a disagreement, there's almost always multiple sides to it. There's almost always two people playing into whatever it is you're navigating. And so I think until you can just hear and accept your role, especially if it's already a sensitive thing for you, you're going to find it hard to just have a conversation without that springing up. It's not very practical, but it's kind of just an internal thing.
It sounds like it's more of a personal thing, because I'm even coming from the perspective do I help you in this? Like, how can I help you in this?
You do, I think. Sometimes, like, when you approach things, you try to do it gently. So I think you do help with it. But yeah, I don't know what the practical, I don't have practical help with that. My bigger trigger for defense is if you brought something up to me and I'm not prepared. So if I'm not prepared, I can find myself very defensive. So I think the benefit for us is I tend to be the person who's brought it up. So I tend to have kind of already assessed what's happening and why it's happening and how I'm feeling and how you're feeling and try to address it more gently. If your goal as a couple is to be stronger and have better communication, you need to be entering into those conversations thinking about how the other person is going to receive it. So she could take that, instead of saying, you Stonewall, have a conversation and say, I've become aware that I am quite defensive in arguments and I'm really sorry about that. I need help with this because I'm trying to work on it, but I find it really hard when you raise things in a way that's like quick to point to the finger, or you raise things when I'm not prepared, or whatever the thing is. Like, just assess that for yourself. And if she can get him on side, can you help me with this? I think that's one really good step. It's so easy when you've been hurt. Well, you think you've been hurt, or you have been hurt, or something's gone in a way that's not constructive, to come in and be like, you did this. But instead of like just taking a second to be like, how would he best receive this for the outcome that we want as a couple? And think about the words that you say. I think that's going to really help your own defensiveness as well. If we're both getting defensive, I find it really hard to calm down from that. If we're bouncing off each other, that's, again, it's still kind of like stonewalling. You're just bouncing back and forth. You're both defensive. You're not in a great headspace. You need to take a sec, stop the conversation and come back.
I think it's a matter of like, I really think they should go through this study. This stuff. You know, like this would be so helpful.
She asks for, is there things like
that's
books
what I was thinking of.
Instead of it being like books for me to fix his stonewalling, that I think is just an important thing across the board. First point of call should not be like, how do I fix this thing in my husband? How do I help him fix this thing? How do you fix yourself? Because it almost always is going to be multiple sides. And almost always more efficient if you start to work on yourself before addressing those things.
But even work on those things, work on yourself first, but openly.
With him,
you know what I mean? Just like, I identify that I do this and I really want to work on that. You know, it's not just a matter of just do it internally because you could come back and then say like, yeah, I've been doing all this work.
Yeah, and you've done nothing.
When? You know?
He doesn't know. It's your responsibility until it's communicated. And so communicating as clearly as you can about how you're feeling, about what you're trying to work on. You don't have to avoid the fact that he doesn't react well. Like, you can still mention that, but I think if your focus is working there first, I reckon that we would find the best transformation in this situation by doing that. This one, I'm not sure it's stonewalling completely.
Look, there might be stonewalling in it, but it's a lot more than just is it stonewalling. It's like, yeah, cool, maybe, but there's other stuff in there as well.
Look at your history, look at how you work as a couple, and start working on yourself, at your triggers. Cool. All right. Well, that's on stonewalling, guys.
And that was good. Even just that analysis, is this stonewalling? I think it just makes me think so much deeper about the conversation. You know what I mean? And even just the growth is just like, again, it's not clear cut. Oh, stonewaller. It's like,
man, we're so trigger happy in this world. We're so, and us as individuals, so trigger happy to just like point the finger and be like, that's what it is. And sometimes it is, but I just don't think there's much to lose by being a bit curious about the situation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great topics, babe.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Chatter, again. Really appreciate your story, and thank you to these Reddit people that will never know. Imagine just listening to a podcast one day and be like, "Oh,
that's me.
That's my story.
That's my story."
Well, if you do, I hope you keep listening.
Awesome. Well, ChatGPT is gonna chat us out because today's topic was Stonewall. I asked it to do a theme of Stonewall. Just a stone wall.
Stone walls, yeah.
And there you have it. No more walls between us, at least for today. We've tackled the tough stuff, breaking down what stonewalling is and how to chip away at those emotional barriers. Don't let this convo be the end. Take what we've uncovered and start demolishing those walls in your own relationships. Remember, open hearts, open minds. Catch you next time on Honey, We Need to Chat, where we keep breaking barriers and building connections. Stay open, stay awesome. Good chat. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.